Hello and welcome to Owning the Narrative. I am Bulow. The show will feature the top news of the week, complete with my observations, and even a little bit of sarcasm thrown in. The top news stories will be taken from my morning news briefings that I write on the Rick Bulow New Media blog every weekday morning. If you go on to like what you see, smash that thumbs up button. And now, let's go right into the news. As the Democratic convention begins this week, U.S. Attorney John Durham is looking into the controversial Trump-Russia collusion hoax, and I found this from the Conservative Daily News. Major development in the Durham probe is ignored during CNN and MSNBC's primetime coverage. This by Chuck Ross. CNN and MSNBC devoted little coverage Friday and Saturday to the first development in U.S. Attorney John Durham's investigation of the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. Kevin Kleinsmith, the former FBI lawyer, is expected to plead guilty to altering an email regarding former Trump aide Carter Page's past association with the CIA. CNN and MSNBC employ at least 3 former FBI and CIA officials as analysts, though none appeared on air to discuss the Kleinsmith case. And MSNBC host Chuck Todd questioned whether the Durham probe was aimed at creating confusion. CNN and MSNBC largely ignored the news Friday that a former FBI lawyer will plead guilty to altering a mail related to Carter Page, the former Trump campaign aide. Now, the network mentioned the case against former FBI lawyer Kevin Kleinsmith in their primetime broadcast, according to a review conducted by the Daily Center News Foundation. The networks had brief segments during the daytime broadcast that reported the news that Kleinsmith would plead guilty to making false statements by altering an email that downplayed Page's last past work with the CIA. Page had been in operational contact for the CIA through at least 2013 and provided information about his interactions with a Russian intelligence officer. Kleinsmith, 38, added a line to a CIA liaison's email in June 2017 that said that Page was, quote-unquote, not a source for the spy agency, according to the charging documents. The case is the first major development in an investigation led by U.S. Attorney John Durham into the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. CNN and MSNBC will be well positioned to discuss the case since the networks between them employ at least 3 analysts who worked in either Crossfire Hurricane or the Special Counsel's probe. MSNBC has also hired former CIA Director John Brennan as an analyst. MSNBC recently hired Lisa Page, a former FBI lawyer, and Andrew Weissman, a top prosecutor on the Special Counsel's probe, as analysts. Page was general counsel to Andrew McCabe when he served as FBI deputy director. She was directly involved in decisions that made in Crossfire Hurricane. Neither appeared on MSNBC on Friday. McCabe is an analyst at CNN, though he also did not appear on TV to discuss the Kleinsmith development. CNN last year also hired former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker. He also did not appear on air, though it is unclear if he is still with the network. The lack of coverage of the Kleinsmith case is in stark contrast to CNN and MSNBC's handling of developments during the Special Counsel's investigation. Both networks were known for their wall-to-wall coverage of every twist and turn in the Russia probe. Neither of the network's primetime hosts addressed the Kleinsmith news. CNN's Rachel Maddow, one of the leading proponents in the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy theory, did not mention the story. A review of Grabien, the television monitoring service, shows that the Klein Smith news was reported on CNN during Rick Baldwin's and John King shows. Evan Perez, a CNN justice reporter, appeared for a total of less than 5 minutes to report the developments in Klein Smith's case. CNN spent more time discussing Klein Smith, though the coverage was more dismissive of the development. NBC reporter Pete Williams outlined the case in a segment on Andrea Mitchell's show. Brian Williams spent 30 seconds on the case during his show airing just before midnight. Chuck Todd, an MSNBC host who also anchors Meet the Press, was dismissive of the case. He suggested that the Durham probe is less important than an investigation of WikiLeaks. What's unclear is whether this is a serious investigation into what else like the issue of WikiLeaks and how many American citizens' privacy and rights were violated by these Russian hackers who did this, he said. He also asked whether the Durham probe was aimed at creating confusion about investigating the investigators here. We will wait for this investigation and see if there is any concern about how many American citizens were targeted by WikiLeaks, something that seems to have gotten lost with this Justice Department, Todd continued. Contrary to Todd's claim, the General Counsel's office brought charges against a Russian intelligence unit that provided stolen emails to WikiLeaks during the 2016 campaign. The U.S. government has also charged WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in a case unrelated to the Russian email hacks. MSNBC host Ari Melber discussed the case during a segment questioning the motives of Attorney General William Barr. Melber's guest, former federal prosecutor John Flannery, called the Klein Smith plea really weak tea. Neither MSNBC nor CNN immediately responded to requests for comment. Now, what's interesting about this is the fact that, yes, Trump is investigating the investigators, which is what should be, especially since not only Carter Page, but you also had General Flynn and a few others, what I would say falsely targeted and falsely accused of collusion and a few other things, which I'll get to probably soon. The story is ongoing, and you know that I will be following it very closely. Last night, the Democratic convention began, and there was some good speeches. And Amy Klobuchar had delivered only 3 words for the vice presidential nominee. This coming from Red State and my good friend Becca Lower. Klobuchar says exactly 3 words about VP nominee and DNC speech. Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat, Minnesota, endorses Democrat presidential candidate, that's from the pick. Earlier on Monday evening, the list of speakers stated for the first night of the 4-night Democrat National Convention seemed to indicate that the opening speaker would be former presidential candidate and Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar. Let's just say it didn't turn out that way. The quote-unquote show started at 9 Eastern Time with the pre-show video introduction full of clips from speeches by former President Barack Obama, the late Congressman John Lewis of Georgia, who passed away 1 month ago Monday, and then the Democrats' 2020 presumptive nominee, Joe Biden. Instead was almost normal, but once it got underway, it felt like you turned into an episode of 2020 combined with Desperate Housewives. Actress Ava Longoria Bastone, who was tasked to serve as a host for the convention across America, told viewers that the aim of the convention was to save America. She didn't specify from what. She continued by saying that the past few months have tested us all, a reference to the Wuhan coronavirus pandemic, but that the past 4 months have left us diminished by the sitting president. But that wasn't the end of the Trump bashing. From there, it got more convoluted, with a bunch of pre-recorded content jammed together with such speed it can only be appreciated by someone who suffers from ADD. First, there was the Pledge of Allegiance recited by teens. Then, children from what appeared to be every U.S. state, each wearing a red, white, or a blue shirt saying America the Beautiful. Then, after a convocation, Longoria Bastone returned to check in with folks around the country. Another video played of Biden speaking to a crowd. Then we saw our first live political speaker, Wisconsin Congresswoman Gwen Moore, who called the presumed Veep nominee Sister Kamala. Then there was another video, this one with the Bruce Springsteen song The Rising swelling up in the background. The singer and his wife also appeared smiling at the video, or in the video at one point. There were shots of the montage of the Black Lives Matter mural being painted in Manhattan and the BLM street sign being installed. Still, there were more videos. Longoria Bastone reappeared to give us the 3 bullet points for the evening: the pandemic, the falling economy, and systemic racial injustice. A cheerful agenda for sure. Oh, then there was Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who condemned President Trump for sending federal troops into the streets of his city and tear gas into the air. Then the two brothers of George Floyd showed up, asking viewers to observe a moment of silence for George, Breonna Taylor, and the many other souls we've lost to injustice. Several of the videos followed, along with remarks by South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn, whose endorsement of Biden before that state's primary may have clinched his win there. Apparently, Clyburn was forgotten all about Joe's comments to interviewer Charlemagne the God. Anyway, you guys said there were more videos and other politicians spoke too. Oh, and then Democrat governors were given the floor, and then all of the Republicans that could manage to rustle up. After video of a few of these, it was Klobuchar's turn. The Minnesota senator did not make an appearance until the second and final hour. She began by speaking about the Democrats' narrative du jour, saving the U.S. Postal Service from Donald Trump, affirming that she believes the post office is essential. Then she made one of the quips that Trump is still going to have a change of address next year, yet with a straight face she called him divisive. It went on like that, with her words touching on racial injustice and how Biden is a man of deep experience, whom Barack Obama leaned on for his decency and strength. Klobuchar then talked about her own run for the presidency, then paused before she mentioned Senator Kamala Harris, her former rival for the vice presidential slot. She used those 3 words to talk about her: my friend Kamala. What an endorsement there, Senator Salad Comb. Anyway, the whole event was a display of utter disorder. When the exec producer of the political programming you're watching also produced a Tony Awards and a Super Bowl, this is the kind of show you'd expect, apparently. But what became clear right away was that about it was one thing. This isn't a convention, it's TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, support group meeting that someone decided to televise. And that by my good friend Becca Lower. And we have 3 more days of this convention, followed by the Republicans next week. Lord only knows what the Republicans are going to do at their virtual convention. We do know that President Trump is slated to give the acceptance speech at the White House, I think on the front lawn from what I had read. But we have exactly 11 weeks until the election day So things are ramping up. Should be interesting. Many politicians say that they want to protect the democracy, but are we really a democracy? What do the founding fathers say about that? This from townhall.com. Why the Founding Fathers Despised Democracy by Jim Hunsinger. And this was published in December of 2018, but with the conventions in full swing, I figured I'd pull this out. Plato wrote in the Republic, and so tyranny naturally arises out of democracy. The Founding Fathers despised democracies. They desired democratic principles, but not a democracy. As Plato decrees above, a democracy can only be commandeered to establish a totalitarian state. The founders inherently understand this and wholly rejected a democracy, or rejected forming a democracy, rather. Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. And Madison goes on to splendidly explain how this very same erroneous belief, held by collectivists, destroys property rights, which is foundational to any society. Theoretic politicians who have patronized the species of government have erroneously supposed that by reducing mankind to a perfect equality in their political rights, they would, at the same time, be perfectly equalized and assimilated in their possessions, their opinions, and their passions. Madison reiterates the view of Plato over 2,000 years prior when in the Republic, Plato writes that the loss of principles sends a democracy spiraling into a tyranny. The neglect of other things, writes Plato, introduced a change in democracy which occasions the need for tyranny. Just as Samuel warned the Israelites nearly 3,000 years ago as their principles and faith in God waned, Plato issued a warning which has now befallen the United States. With each presidential cycle, many Americans demand a powerful strongman to ease their suffering, and falsely and foolishly believe we are a democracy. The same disease magnified and intensified by liberty overmasters democracy. The truth being that the excessive increase in anything often causes a reaction in the opposite direction, forewarns Plato. The excessive liberty, whether in states or individuals, seems only to pass into excess slavery, and so tyranny naturally arises out of democracy. Cincinnatus, in Anti-Federalist number 64, gives a description of a democracy. A democracy, declares Cincinnatus, which, thus bereft of its powers and shorn of its strength, will stand a melancholy monument of popular impotence. Not a raving support of such governmental structures flowing from the pen of Cincinnatus, disclosing the disdain our fathers have for such a political structure. In fact, the word democracy appears nowhere in either the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, and in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution guarantees to every state in this union a republican form of government. James Madison, known as father of the Constitution, states we are to exist under republican constitutions, referencing both the federal constitution and the state constitutions, not constitutions under a democracy. The functional deficiency of a democracy is unprotected majority rule or tyranny of the majority. The majority simply cannot rule otherwise. It could and would simply vote in advantages and even the theft and destruction of the minority. This is the very reason for a moral compact recognizing fundamental right, or our natural rights that which are bestowed upon us by our Creator. Where these natural rights remain always utterly understood by others, whether government or the majority. The only purpose of a civil government is to protect our natural rights. Adam Smith elucidated in 1759 that All government is but a perfect remedy for the deficiency of wisdom and virtue, thus acknowledging the fallen nature of man as did our forefathers and founding fathers. California State University professor of political science Edward Erler expounds this point, writing, "The majority cannot invade the rights of the minority, nor can unanimous consent rightfully do what is intrinsically unjust. Majority rule itself can only operate within certain bounds. Yes, quite often the voice of the majority is completely irrelevant, as even the voice of the majority is bound to the sovereign rights of the individual and those rights which God bequeathed upon us at creation." Attorney and professor Jenna Ellis explains, "It does not matter to divine law whether an individual agrees with biblical principles. We are not free under divine law to negotiate the fixed, objective, scientific, and constructive law. Natural law, God's law, is immutable and immovable. And this is why America is a conscious republic, not a democracy." Now, over the next definitely all this week during the Democrat convention, probably a couple of times next week during the Republican convention, you may hear words like, "We need to save the democracy." We are not a democracy, we are a republic, and we need to let our politicians know that basically a democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner, and that's not how we are to be. The Democrat convention ends tonight with Joe Biden receiving the nominee for president, and from here on in, things will be ramping up. This coming from the Hill.com. Biden set to accept nomination in convention's closing address. Former Vice President Joe Biden will accept the Democrat presidential nomination in a Thursday address, culminating in a decades-long climb in politics and setting up a general election battle with President Trump that his party is desperate to win. The final evening of the Democrat National Convention will center on answering the central question, who is Joe Biden? It will feature various voices from all parts of the former vice president's life, reintroducing him to the nation. According to sources familiar with Thursday night's program, most people know Joe Biden from the vice presidency, but they don't know much else, said one longtime ally to the former vice president. By the time he formally accepts the nomination, I think people will have a very clear sense of who he is, why he's a better choice than Trump, and why the current president is not empathic and unqualified to be president. Biden is expected to draw a sharp contrast with Trump during his address, which will be delivered from his home state of Delaware because of the coronavirus pandemic. He will make the case that the president is not capable to lead the country, zeroing in on issues of character and integrity. Sources familiar with Thursday night's program say the central point or the overall point of his speech will be, "This is who I am, and this is who the president is, and I'll make that point over and over again," said one Biden ally. While a number of polls have shown Biden with a healthy lead in the presidential race, both nationally and in key swing states, a CNN poll released this week pointed to a tighter race. It showed Biden and his running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, Democrat California, with 50% and 46% backing Trump and Vice President Pence. The CNN poll was even closer in the 15 battleground states likely to decide the race, with Biden receiving 49% of support from registered voters and Trump just below him at 48%. There's been a lot of Trump bashing so far at the convention, but Biden needs to make his own case in his convention speech, said Democrat strategist Brad Bannon. Some of Biden's support in the polls is soft because many of his voters are voting against Trump instead of voting for the former vice president, Bannon said. The case against Trump has already been made. What Biden needs to do is sell himself. The best way to sell himself is for the Democrat nominee to convince Americans that he can unify a nation that is spiraling out of control. That's why Thursday night is pivotal if Biden is to win at post-convention bounds. Democrat strategist Jamal Simmons said for the most part, Democrat voters are at peace about with who Biden is. For those making up their minds, he just needs to be a credible choice, Simmons said. What voters want is normalcy. I don't think that was a credible message a year ago, but now it's obvious that voters just want to go back to something that is normal and predictable. Testimonials and videos at the virtual Democrat convention have been centered around depicting Biden, a vice president for 8 years and a senator for more than 30, who has been at the center of U.S. political life for decades, as a normal everyday guy. Biden has run for president twice before, chaired the Anita Hill Clarence Thomas hearings, and carries a Rolodex that would be the envy of any politician or world leader. At the convention, the focus has been on casting Biden as an average guy who grew up with a stutter, took the Amtrak to work in Washington so he could spend more time with his young sons, and who suffered a miserable loss, first with the death of his wife and infant daughter, and years later with his grown son. While he celebrated his party's nomination on Tuesday night, he did so with little pomp in a high school library, a setting that speaks the normalcy he promises to bring. In her speech on Monday night, former First Lady Michelle Obama summed it up by saying Biden will govern as someone who's lived a life that the rest of us can recognize. It's a normalcy that Democrats hope voters will be craving after the Trump years. And this theme is one Biden and his associates and allies intend to hammer home on Thursday. Democrat strategists say Thursday night will be a successful night for Biden if he continues to highlight those themes, using the pandemic as the latest example for why this election is a referendum on Trump. Biden needs to build upon the convention themes to further define his governance style as president. Empathic, bipartisan, and with an eye toward regaining leadership in the world, said Basil Smikle, who served as the executive director of the New York State Democrat Party and was a former aide to Hillary Clinton. Simmons and other strategists say the crises facing the nation are well suited to Biden's strengths, something that will be on full display on Thursday night. It's not just that Joe knows pain and suffering. He knows what to do the day after and what to do to get back up again, Simmons said. This is a moment made for Joe's talents. Now, while tonight is considered a quote-unquote referendum on Trump, well, actually this whole week have been a referendum on Trump, he and the Republicans will have a chance at their rebuttal next week. But, I mean, things are going to be interesting these next 11 weeks, including 4 debates. And hopefully when it all comes out and the smoke clears, the better party and better man will win. In a crushing blow to the old guard media, OAN Chanel Rayon is launching National White House Correspondents Association. This coming from an article from the NOQ report. And it's a guest post. Chanel Rayon, Chief White House Correspondent for One American News, OAN, announced today the formal launch of the National White House Correspondents Association, NWHCA. Ryan's newly formed correspondence organization has begun accepting applications by invitation only. NWHCA's first phase mission aims to accomplish the following. 1. Bring more balanced and diverse question in the White House briefing room. 2. Foster meaningful discussion and debate at the White House. And 3. Restore free and open press coverage in the briefing room and coverage of the White House. The NWHCA seeks to restore balance and diversity of viewpoints in the White House news coverage. The American public is best served when all voices are heard and the President's message is unfiltered. According to Rion, the WHCA has maneuvered almost all balance and diversity out of the White House correspondence pool and briefing room, demonstrating only that they consider America's free press the exclusive property of the progressive, quote-unquote, reformers of Washington. That is not representative of a free and balanced press. NWHCA's presence at the White House will create a healthier atmosphere for our nation. Our republic thrives best when all viewpoints are considered and discussed. Ryan founded the NWHCA on her own initiative in Delaware, April 2020, after her experience with the White House Correspondents Association, WHCA, including their role to expel Ryan from the WHCA, a club of which she had never even been a member. Moving forward, Ryan's NWHCA is seeking shared control of the White House briefing room and other delegated press functions with the 117-year-old WHCA in order to restore balanced White House reporting, which at present largely amounts to a confederation of journalists with long socialist agendas and deep links to the Democrat Party. Ryan has volunteered to serve without remuneration throughout what she says will be the organizational period of 60 months, including all of the second Trump administration. Part of that organizational period will include the NWHCA's expectation to set up legal networks, state by state, to defend the First Amendment and press rights in the courts. Ryan became nationally controversial after traveling to Ukraine with Rudy Giuliani, President Trump's personal attorney, to film money laundering and bribery testimony related to Joe and Hunter Biden. In 2019, Ryan interviewed high-profile witnesses in Ukraine that Adam Schiff had concealed from the American public in the Trump impeachment hearings. Thereafter, Ryan became a target of WHCA members' orchestrated smear campaigns. Nonetheless, President Trump recognized, often, OAN's efforts to deliver real news to the American public. After the WHCA failed in its attempt to evict Ryan from the White House briefing room, Ryan returned daily as a guest of the White House by permission of press secretaries Stephanie Grisham and Kayleigh McEnany. WHCA relegated Ryan to stand in the back of the room, segregated and roped off from the rest of the press pool. Ryan was defended and protected by thousands of supporters after WHCA members attempted to smear her by concocting stories they invented and fed to the tabloid Daily Mail. WHCA members claimed Ryan has no longer deserved any presence in the White House nor in the Brady briefing room. Ryan, who graduated from Harvard University in 2015 after 5 years in Cambridge, said she had no aspirations in broadcasting and was not specifically trained in journalism beyond several journalism courses and intensive writing as an honors graduate with international relations and religion with film production training. As a stalwart defender of the First Amendment, she soon found herself recruited by Charles and Robin Herring of the OAN network in 2019, where she found her lifetime of dedication to constitutional and conservative causes perfectly suited. She looks forward to a future where NWHCA will contribute to balance and accuracy in White House reportage. For more information, www.nwhca.press, and on the main one there's a tweet to it. Let me just scroll down and share it. Here's a tweet from Chanel Ryan from yesterday. Breaking. Newly organized National White House Correspondents Association launches offers counterpart to 117-year-old WHCA. Ryan's NWHCA is seeking shared control of White House briefing room and all of the delegated press functions with the 117-year-old WHCA. And there are two Twitter links here. Let me open them up for you. Well, the first one is the National White House Correspondents Association page, which is, and on there you can see the new media's new home at the White House. And the tweet that was mentioned is that which I had mentioned, and there's a press release to it as well. But it's in the article which is dropped below. But I gotta say that this is probably historic because Andrew Breitbart back about 2011, 2012, before he died, said the new media is taking over where the old media failed. And and with the White House Correspondents Association, it just proves that they have failed, that the old media has failed, and that the new media is taking over. Because after all, as Patriot Soapbox always says, we are the news now. So it'll be interesting to see just what comes of this. And I will definitely keep an eye on this as time goes on. And that's going to do it for the news for this week. I am Mick Bulow. Again, if you like what you watch, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell an enemy or two even. And I will be back next week. Until next time, peace.